I'm Eric Anderson. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, it was an uphill battle and the votes simply weren't there. State lawmakers shelve an aid in dying bill today. The key arguments by opponents who came out on top.
And South Carolina's Assembly votes on the Confederate flag at the State House, how attitudes about historical symbols and names are changing in San Diego. I'm Peggy Pico with Civil Discourse and the impact of symbolism. Then, San Diego State University professor and triathlete David Huntley died on Saturday from ALS, but his fight for the right to try for accelerated experimental drug approval for terminal patients moves forward.
You know, that little cold feeling that goes up the back of your neck, you realize, oh, there's something wrong.
Cancer slowed Marty Emerald down, but the former reporter found a new way to speak up for others and the thing that she wants to accomplish before stepping down from the San Diego City Council. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. Dwayne Brown is off. A bill that would let terminally ill Californians take their own life with help from a doctor has stalled at the state capitol. The author of the measure pulled it today just before a crucial vote in the state assembly, meaning the measure is not completely dead. From our North County Bureau, KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg has more.
The aid in dying bill was passed by the Senate earlier this year. It was helped by the video testimony of Californian Brittany Maynard, who had brain cancer. She moved to Oregon to legally end her life last fall. The California's measure is based on Oregon's Death with Dignity law. It would allow people with less than 6 months to live to ask their doctor for a lethal dose of drugs. Opponents say the bill would legalize assisted suicide and would subject some people to undue pressure. Supporters argue the measure has numerous safeguards, including the requirement that a terminal diagnosis would have to be confirmed by a second doctor. The bill could be brought back sometime next year. Kenny Goldberg, KPBS News.
Congressman Duncan Hunter says he plans to introduce a bill that would restrict funding to so-called sanctuary cities. KPBS Fronteras reporter Jean Guerrero says the decision comes after a San Francisco woman was killed by an immigrant who had been deported 5 times.
San Diego and San Francisco both offer immigrants sanctuary. Their law enforcement officers don't always turn immigrants over to immigration officials. San Francisco Sheriff's Department is under fire for releasing immigrant Francisco Sanchez. And now Sanchez is charged with fatally shooting 32-year-old Catherine Steinle at a popular tourist spot. John Ingracia at the San Diego County Sheriff's Department says officers here do notify immigration officials when an immigrant of interest is going to be released from jail.
We will simply notify them that they were going to be released within X amount of time.
That way, immigration officials can have the option to detain the individual. Ingracia says this policy is not going to change anytime soon. Jean Guerrero, KPBS News.
California Senator Barbara Boxer, meanwhile, is weighing in on the sanctuary city debate. She supports deporting violent criminals. In a statement, Boxer said she's reached out to Governor Jerry Brown to see if state law was followed in this case. She also wants to see if the law needs to be strengthened to stop tragedies like the shooting in San Francisco. Getting into a UC school could be getting easier with a new initiative from the University of California. The Transfer Pathways Plan lays out specific courses for students to take. For 10 of the most popular majors, the move comes as part of a budget deal that was negotiated between UC President Janet Napolitano and Governor Jerry Brown. The plan includes increasing the number of transfer students at UC schools by the fall of 2017. Relief is on the way for victims of a foreclosure fraud scheme in San Diego. Prosecutors say 121 homeowners will get more than $820,000 in restitution. Now, the checks are going to be distributed this week. The case goes back to a scam led by William Hutchings and 9 co-conspirators. He promised victims foreclosure protection that didn't exist in exchange for $10,000. Hutchings is serving a 46-year prison term. San Diego saw a drop in the number of drunk driving incidents over the holiday weekend. San Diego officers arrested 53 people for driving under the influence, compared to 87 arrests last year. The CHP reported fewer deadly DUI accidents around the state. Officers say this year's reporting period was 1 day shorter because of the July 4th holiday falling on a weekend. A measure to take down the Confederate flag from South Carolina's State House moved forward today. The state Senate there gave its final approval this morning. House members are set to debate the bill on Wednesday. Governor Nikki Haley has urged lawmakers to remove the flag after the killing of 9 black people at an historic African-American church in Charleston last month. Police say the gunman was motivated by racial hatred. Peggy Pico continues our coverage with a look at changing attitudes about symbols, names, and flags here in San Diego.
Joining me to discuss the impact of symbolism and the importance of civil discourse are my guests, Ashley Virtue with the National Conflict Resolution Center and Aaron Bruce, Chief Diversity Officer at San Diego State University. And Aaron, what is your reaction to this debate over removing a flag that some say is a symbol of Southern heritage while others say it's evolved into a symbol of hate?
Well, I think it's important to take a look at symbols holistically in our country and what it means historically. And as people change, their representation of symbols changes and the meaning for them changes. I think it's important, and it's a great opportunity to have a rich conversation that's long overdue in our country. There's a lot of pain in our country, and we haven't healed from wounds that might have been started in the inception of our country. I think over time this is a good thing for people to put the issues on the table and have good conversations.
And speaking of conversations, Ashley, what is your reaction to how this discourse is evolving and changing over the Confederate flag?
You know, I think that in our country there's a lot of confusion about the difference between debate and dialogue. And in a debate, you're really speaking to your constituents that agree with you, and maybe you're perhaps talking to the wavering middle and trying to convince them to come to your side. Whereas in a dialogue, you're really speaking directly with the person who perhaps opposes your opinion. So, my opinion of it is that we're engaged in more of a debate than we are a dialogue at this point, and hopefully we would be able to see that people could actually have more of a conversation around what some of these deeper issues are, as opposed to just speaking at one another instead of with one another.
And Aaron, I know State Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez is calling for Robert E. Lee Elementary School in Paradise Hills, calling for that name to be changed because of Civil War. You know, the general actually left a mixed legacy on race and slavery. So how does one balance acknowledging historical figures and what they were and being culturally sensitive?
Well, I think KPBS has been great at doing that. I mean, with the Local Heroes Awards, it's a great opportunity to redefine what a hero is. And this is a great opportunity to do that for a school and looking at what it meant then, and also what do we want our young people to think about leaders and who they are and who they represent of all different types of identities. So it's a great opportunity to have a long overdue conversation about the history of our country.
And how about you, Ashley, having a productive dialogue over, let's say, changing Robert E. Lee's name on the school marquee or a mascot, making this decision over whether something's offensive or not? How do you have that dialogue?
I think what's important in having the dialogue is that you really work with people from various sides of the conversation, and that you give them an opportunity to express what their underlying values are in the situation. So a lot of times what happens is that there are assumed values placed on one side or the other, and I think giving people the opportunity to really be part of the conversation, and then more so than just part of the conversation, part of the solution and what they'll be able to do moving forward. So keeping a very forward-looking, constructive tone to the conversation.
And I have to ask locally here, Aaron, as chief of SDSU Diversity, what do students say about names and symbols like the Aztec warrior mascot, for instance, and how this makes them feel?
Well, I think it's important to understand that in the evolution of any organization, there's going to be change. And with that change, identity changes as well, and views of one's identity change. And our students are very focused on inclusion, diversity, and leadership. And as part of that, they're reevaluating what it means to be a member of the San Diego State University community. And part of that means to think about, okay, if leadership starts here, what does that mean in terms of diversity and inclusion? So over time, I think our students are going to make some very thoughtful decisions about how to represent themselves in our diverse community.
Well, some may argue that dissecting historical figures retrospectively is a very slippery slope. What would you say to people who say these changes are politically motivated and they don't really change attitudes? Let's start with you, Aaron.
Well, I think they do. If I see images, positive images of women in STEM, it's going to make me feel differently about the positive contributions that women have made historically. So I think it's important to look back at our history as a country and think about the positive achievements of many different groups of people, whether they're people with disabilities, whether they're from the LGBT community or other ethnic groups.
And Ashley, let me get your perspective on that. So people saying, listen, this is just politically correct terminology. Is it really going to change anything?
And I think the way that we're able to discuss with one another what the terminology means is where the conversation really starts. So there may be different perceptions of certain terminologies. And so again, getting past that surface level of this is a word we like or don't like, or this is a symbol we like or don't like, what is it really about? What are the values there that we need to discuss so that we can move beyond the surface level and really talk about the deeper issues at hand?
All right, Ashley Virtue and Aaron Bruce, thank you so much.
Thank you.
She called it a leap of faith, Marty Emerald's campaign for San Diego City Council. After a year that included a breast cancer diagnosis and a wedding, she decided not to seek re-election. As KPBS reporter Claire Tregeser explains, it's all about the timing.
This particular item doesn't meet California safety standards.
Marty Emerald spent 22 years as an investigative reporter for Channel 10. She was known as the troubleshooter, a consumer advocate.
Are you saying that you do look these things up on the internet?
Yes, we do.
How did the rock and roller stroller get past you then?
I don't know for sure.
When she saw the TV industry was changing, she quit and ran for city council in 2008.
It was a leap of faith because as a journalist, I'd never even campaigned for anybody. I never endorsed anybody.
While the city council job was different, the ideas behind it were the same.
I wanted to be an advocate on a whole different level.
As a councilwoman, she pushed for improvements in public safety and affordable housing. She worked for her constituents who range from affluent Kensington residents to immigrants in City Heights. Then last August, she had a mammogram and was diagnosed with breast cancer.
You know, that little cold feeling that goes up the back of your neck, you realize, oh, there's something wrong.
During chemotherapy and radiation, she missed some council meetings and scaled back on events, but still remained committed to her job.
I think I was in denial. Really.
Her doctors have said she has a good chance to make a full recovery. She didn't let cancer stop her from getting married in November. Her husband, Carl Bradley, is a construction manager for the Sweetwater Union High School district. She'd met him on a dating website 2 years after her first husband died.
I didn't put my picture up, and I didn't use my full name, and most of the fellas I met were very polite, and it was nice meeting them. Some just ran away because they didn't know. You know, I have that reputation as a ball buster, I guess.
While the 60-year-old councilwoman could run again, she has decided not to.
Anybody who has been through, diagnosed with a life-threatening illness takes stock in their life. And what am I doing each day? How is it serving me and my interests? How is it serving my family? Am I doing the things I want to be doing?
She's already endorsed her chief of staff, Ricardo Flores, to fill her seat. She says he kept the office going while she was sick.
I realized that here are these men and women in my staff who really, they've got it down. They're ready. So time for the old lady to step back and let these young folks go out there and become the next generation of leaders in our community.
Emerald counts renegotiating the police contract this year as her biggest accomplishment in office. She pushed for a survey of how much officers make.
Everybody could see that the police, our police, are woefully underpaid compared to other agencies.
Police officers got raises and extra benefits on July 1st. Her other proud moments are reforming the taxi industry and building a skate park in City Heights. But there's one item still on Emerald's to-do list: building more fire stations.
We need 19 of them to fill in areas that really are unprotected at this point.
She won't get it done before she leaves office, but she has a solution.
My last campaign is a firehouse bond, and that will be on the November 16 ballot. That would create a fund that can only be spent building fire stations.
As she prepares for her exit, Emerald sees another way she's affected people's lives. Her district represents many immigrants, and others, she says, have never felt they had a voice with government.
We reach out to the community and we say, what do you want? What do you need? And let's work together to make it happen. For once, you've got people in neighborhoods who recognize that government really is here to serve them. And if they communicate their needs, there'll be somebody who will listen.
Claire Tregesser, KPBS News.
KPBS video journalist Nick McVicker helped produce that story. Go to kpbs.org/citycouncil to see our profiles of other council members. The push for stricter regulations on electronic cigarettes continues in California. It comes a day before a legislative committee reviews a bill to ban e-cigarettes at work, schools, restaurants, and hospitals. The measure also makes e-cigarettes fall under the same existing laws as cigarettes and tobacco products. Officials say use of the devices tripled among middle and high school students from 2013 to 2014. San Diego State University professor and triathlete David Huntley passed away last weekend from ALS. Since his diagnosis in 2013, Huntley aggressively campaigned for accelerated FDA approval of an experimental drug and other promising treatments. David Huntley and his wife Linda spoke with Peggy Pico in March. Here's that conversation.
The so-called right to try experimental drug law has passed in several other states. The law is designed to help ease suffering for the terminally ill, but some argue it could have a negative effect on drug testing. Joining us is Dr. Gary Firestein, director of the Clinical and Translational Research Institute at UC San Diego, and Linda Clark, a right to try advocate and wife of retired SDSU professor David Huntley, who has ALS, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease. And Linda, I understand your husband was training for a triathlon when he was diagnosed with ALS. It left him in a wheelchair and unable to speak. However, earlier he told us through a text computer, voice computer, that he really wants the chance to try the experimental drug GM604. Let's listen.
I have had ALS for 2.5 years, and based on my progression, will pass in the next 6 to 12 months. There are no drugs in the pipeline for approval in that window, and most of the drugs under investigation at best treat the symptom and not the disease. The early clinical trial of GM604 resulted in a significant slowing or even cessation of progression in 7 of 8 treated patients. When GM604 was given to one other patient outside the clinical trial, he saw modest but measurable improvements in function. If Chenervan is forced to go through a phase 3 trial before approval, it will take 3 years, and I, together with 15,000 ALS patients in the U.S. and 300,000 worldwide, will die.
Now, Linda, what have you and David been doing to try to get him access to this GM604 drug?
David first learned about this drug when the manufacturer published their results back in October, and we immediately contacted Chenervan, a small biotech firm in Pasadena, to ask them what the next steps were and that we'd like to have access to this drug. We soon found out that we were not alone. There are patients nationwide who read the same information, and we've been working together with them on a campaign to urge the FDA to grant accelerated approval. And the FDA has all those tools in place. They just need to adopt those.
Sure. So because it's not FDA, if I get this right, FDA approved right now, he can't have it right now.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. Dr. Firestein, in January, a California lawmaker introduced a right to try bill that would protect patients and their doctors from legal repercussions if they took experimental drugs, so drugs that hadn't been approved by the FDA yet. What are some of the concerns allowing a terminally ill patient to try an experimental drug?
Well, this is really a reflection of many larger societal issues related to the balance between individual rights and societal needs and population health. It would be very difficult to argue, for instance, that someone that was truly terminal and there was an effective agent out there, that they should not have the right to take this agent. On the other hand, the way clinical trials are performed to test for drug efficacy or benefit is by taking typically two groups of patients, sometimes more, and having one get the standard of care that's available, and the other receive the experimental medicine. And then you compare those two at the end. In some cases, there are no therapies, such as with ALS, to compare them to. So if there is a bypass pathway by which someone could obtain the medications, then it's a much simpler pathway potentially for patients potentially to take. And I think that it would have an impact on the ability to recruit patients into studies. The other issue is a result of the fact that it is not always easy to assess what is truly hopeless. Sometimes it is obvious. I think with this particular disease, it is obvious. But in other cases, it's not nearly as clear, and the line between what is truly terminal and what is not can be quite fuzzy. And doctors don't have crystal balls necessarily in order to do that.
So just on the clinical trial system, then, could there be a parallel path, perhaps, one for terminally ill patients, so that it didn't skew the current system where you have a double-blind study or a blind study?
Well, there's a couple of possibilities. One is called compassionate use, although that currently the pathway through the FDA from that is rather long and Byzantine in terms of how one ultimately can get the medicine. So there's a lot of obstacles in the way. The alternative also is to have larger and more creative study designs rather than the traditional placebo-controlled studies in order to increase access quicker.
Let me ask Linda, how come the FDA's compassionate law doesn't apply or wouldn't work for David?
There has been one patient that received this drug through compassionate use. It took him over a year to jump through all the hoops to make it available. It took the cooperation of the manufacturer, and they had to basically donate all their time to make it happen. We don't know that they'd be willing to do that again for other patients. It's very costly on the part of the drug maker.
What would you like to see, Linda? How would you like to see this move forward, the right to try? How would you like to get these drugs to people like your husband faster?
Right to try is a step in the right direction. It won't be all that's needed for patients like my husband. Accelerated approval, which has been in place in the FDA since, I believe, 1993, has all the potential to make this drug available and follow up with controlled data collection so that we learn in the process.
From the process of it. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time. There's a lot more on our website, kpbs.org, about this. Linda Clark and Dr. Gary Firestein, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
Hope Now for ALS met with the FDA for the second time this week on accelerated approval of experimental drugs. A state Senate committee will also discuss the issue on Monday.
I'm Gwen Eichel on the next News Hour. The last-minute push to meet yet another deadline to secure an Iran nuclear deal. That's Tuesday on the PBS News Hour.
A lost Carlsbad dog found her way back home after traveling at least 35 miles. A local dog owner lost her Shar-Pei mix at the Los Penasquitos Canyon Preserve more than a week ago. Georgia, the dog, managed to walk back to her home on Monday. The veterinarian who examined Georgia says she is in remarkable shape for what she endured, including predators, traffic, a rainstorm, and 4th of July fireworks. Iraqi refugees living in the El Cajon Valley got a day at the beach today. The outing designed to help strengthen their connection to San Diego.
So we're going to stay together as a group. Rusty is our partner instructor. He's going to be leading our tour in the water. We're going to be playing some games, practicing some different strokes.
Instructor Dustin Punches offers expert insight on the intricacies of the kayak oar.
On the left side.
The El Cajon High School students gathered at the Coronado Tidelands Beach to try something new.
This is my first time being in paddleboard. Well, it was amazing. The first I was so scared. I fall down only one time, and then they helped me. Well, but then I learned how to.
Not everyone was a first-timer. Fadi Shebli has come out twice before, and he says it's great to see the faces of newcomers who are trying paddleboard and kayaking for the first time.
You know, like when they first came, they never know anything about this. They never even know like how to swim. So, you know, you teach them, you know, take care of them, paddleboard, kayaking. It's pretty good. You know, I mean, once you do that to them, they will never forget you. They always come back for you.
Ben McHugh runs Outdoor Outreach, the nonprofit group that organized the outing. He wants the event to create a cultural bridge for young people.
The majority of these kids come from Iraq, and they're refugees, and a lot of them have gone through a lot of challenge in their life. So they're recently arrived to San Diego. They're looking for a connection to the greater San Diego community, and what better way to do that than to take them out into the outdoors here and introduce them to some of the activities that a lot of us take for granted.
The day wasn't all fun and water games. Students also took a turn at picking up trash along the shore. Organizers hoping to make the connection between recreation and responsibility. San Diego weather's going to be staying mild and dry for the week. Cloudy skies by the beaches, temperatures in the 70s. Same picture in the inland valleys, temperatures there also in the 70s, and some sun out in the mountains, temperatures there in the 60s and 70s. Heating up in the desert, of course, desert triple-digit temperatures expected. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks very much for joining us. We'll be back here tomorrow night. Have a great evening.